This is the Traptrix deck that I was playing in that video where I broke a U-Link. There are only two small changes that didn't really come up in that video in this deck, and that is one card in the extra deck and one in the main deck. So starting off, yeah, we've got the 3 of Maxi and the 3 Ash Blossom. At the time of recording that, there were only 2 Ash Blossoms. I traded a second Vesiculo for the 3rd Ash Blossom. Then onto the actual Traptrix monsters. We've got 3 of Traptrix Murmilio. So this is really the one that you want to be opening because it adds a trap hole from your deck to your hand. Then you can use her to make Sarah, and you then also have a trap card that will trigger the effect of Sarah. Even if your hand is really bad, as long as she's in your hand, it lets you play the game. So that's why I am playing 3 of her. Then Traptrix Nepenthes is actually really interesting. So her effect is similar to Sarah in that it will let you special summon the Traptrix monster from your deck when you activate a trap hole card. However, her effect also will allow you to add one to your hand. So if you want to add a Traptrix Dianea to your hand so you can use her normal summon effect, or a Traptrix Murmillo to your hand so you can use her normal summon effect, then those are options available to you with that. Also, she has 2,000 defense points, and that is actually relevant and comes up. So Traptrix Dianea is that when she is normal summoned, you can add a Traptrix monster from your graveyard and special summon it in defense position. So this will trigger the effect of another Dianea if you've got one in grave. Sometimes you are using it to get Nepenthes, but that is more rare. The usual target for this is Murmillo. Because you're summoning Dianea not on your first turn, unless you're going second maybe and your opponent used some form of hand or deck destruction, then you're summoning her later on in the game when your opponent's going to have more cards in their back row, so you are using this effect generally to summon Traptrix Murmillo. Then her second effect is that when she's special summoned, you can set a trap hole from your graveyard, but banish it during the end phase of the next turn. So this does actually keep trap holes out of your graveyard so that you don't have any traps in your graveyard, which is important for a certain point later on. Then 2 of Traptrix Mantis. So yes, summoning her adds a Traptrix monster from your deck to your hand, and that sounds really good because you should be able to get Dianea off of this. And it is good, it's just not as good as opening with Murmillo, because Murmillo actually gives you the ability to add a trap card from your deck, whereas Mantis doesn't do that. So if your hand is really bad and you have a Mantis rather than a Murmillo, it's not quite as... it doesn't fix the hand is what I'm saying here. Because if the rest of your hand is hand traps and you have a Murmillo, that works out really well. Mantis is really strong, but in hands where you have other trap cards. So you're still likely to draw her at 2. She's still going to be really strong. She's going to help to set up your plays for your following turns, but if you don't have anything already, then she's not going to be as strong, and that's why I am playing 2 of her. Then, as I mentioned, 1 of Traptrix Vesiculo. So she special summons herself, however, this will trigger the effect of Sarah that sets a spell trap card. So if you don't have a follow-up, she'll just be on field. And this won't actually be really accomplishing anything in terms of your board presence regarding monster cards. However, her second effect is that if she's in the graveyard and you control no spell or trap cards, you can banish her to set 1 trap hole from your graveyard to your field. And that can be really good. Now I'm only playing 1 of her. Usually her effect only comes up once per game when you actually do use her effect. That's for each effect. Each effect will come up once per game if they are used at all. But having Vesiculo gives a lot of security when playing this deck, especially to the large amount of mass backer removal that is legal in Master Duel. Then I'm playing 2 of Gamma Seal, so this could be raised to 3 if you want to. However, it's not as necessary in this particular deck as others. There are still, of course, cards that you're going to struggle a lot with. So if your opponent puts an Appaloosa on the board, or a Borreload Savage Dragon, or anything like that that's going to give them multiple negations, or even just the one negate in the terms of Borreload Savage Dragon if they're applying it well. But yeah, there are a lot of cards that are going to just pose a huge problem, and Gamma Seal does solve that. Same as every other deck, it just isn't as needed because this deck has a very different focus compared to everything else. Parallel Exceed. I used to think you could just play 2 of these, but no, definitely you should be on 3. You want this to be as consistent as possible. When I say I used to think you should play 2 of these, that was when you were going for other Link monsters and when we didn't have Sarah yet. So now that we have Sarah, definitely 3 of these, because it is very consistent that you can open a Traptrix monster and a Parallel Exceed, summon Sarah, use Parallel Exceed's effect in your hand to special summon it and one from your deck. They become level 4s, and then you can use them to summon Rafflesia. And you pretty much have your board set up, even if you opened bad otherwise. If it was a Murmillo Parallel Exceed, that is really ideal. On the spell traps, I am playing Regeki. This could be pretty much anything else. Regeki, it's funny, but is not that great of a card. It is free though. You pretty much just have access to Regeki in Master Duel, so it's a good card regardless, and it's in here. It could be Harpy's Feather Duster if you have that. It could be a 3rd Lightning Storm, anything like that. Reborn is particularly strong in this deck because, as I mentioned earlier with the monsters, you do have the secondary effect of when they're special summoned on both Murmillo and on Dianea. So Monster Reborn can be used to trigger those effects. Of course, also because you are going into grind games, because you're destroying a lot of your opponent's monsters and putting them in the graveyard. You can use Reborn to bring back your opponent's monsters that were putting negates on the board, or were just very, very big, because this deck doesn't have access to a lot of very big monsters, but your opponent might. And so this can be used for that, of course, as well as triggering the effects of your Traptrix. Particularly useful is using it to bring back Murmillo and getting rid of your opponent's back row, so that your turn from there can pretty much go off. I am playing 2 of Lightning Storm, as I said. 3 of this is certainly reasonable. It's while you control no face-up cards, not no cards at all. So in particular with this deck where you are setting a lot of trap cards, that can be used past just turn 1 and when your board is totally wiped. So Called by the Graves, you do have a lot of effects that are targets for Ash Blossom in particular. Just one Bottomless Trap Hole. This card seems extremely powerful, and it did used to be. It's not really anymore. And then Treacherous Trap Hole. Now you'll notice I'm not playing a whole lot of destruction trap holes like Bottomless. Treacherous Trap Hole is pretty much my destruction source. It could be reasonable to take Bottomless out, but it is particularly strong in certain matchups, such as if you can banish an Eldritch the Golden Lord, then of course that's really good. Treacherous Trap Hole, a lot of people aren't playing this in Traptrix because it says you have to have no trap cards in your graveyard. However, with this deck's ability to just pull whatever trap card you want out of your deck to be the first one activated, you can make that be Treacherous Trap Hole. And if you've gone into Sarah with Rafflesia, which as I mentioned is extremely consistent, you can use Rafflesia's effect to activate the Treacherous from your deck before you have activated any other trap cards aside from maybe Shade Brigandine, that is in that case going to be under Rafflesia. And then you can reset this by summoning Dianea off of Sarah's effect, so that you still have access to it and you don't have any traps in graveyard still. And then once you go into Kalaria, you can keep bringing back Dianea, but you can also keep resetting the treacherous trap hole and using it while it's on the field without having to use any other trap holes. And that's kind of how you're trying to work into the grind game, is to activate treacherous trap hole as many times as you can before your opponent puts something on board that can't be destroyed or has to be removed in some other way with another trap hole card. So then we got 1 of Void Trap Hole, 2 of Traptrix Trap Hole Nightmare. So this is going to be a negate and destroy card. Time Space Trap Hole is going to remove your opponent's monster summoned from the extra deck. As that is happening a lot, we're playing 2 of these. It's never necessary in this deck to play more than 2 of any particular trap hole. Otherwise you'll just see it more than you actually want it. Even at 2, you pretty much constantly have access to whatever it is, again with the ability to recycle things with Dianea and Kalaria. So once you have seen a trap hole, you pretty much have access to it until it gets banished because you weren't able to reset it or you had to chain too many trap holes during a particular turn. Phantom Knights of Shade Brigandine is another one of those cards that's particularly strong in this deck because it will trigger the effect of Sarah to summon another 4, and I alluded to this earlier, but that lets you exceed summon into Rafflesia, or if you have it, a Redoer. I would go into Rafflesia first, generally unless you're going second, in which case Redoer would then be the answer. I do not have a Redoer. But yeah, just in that you can set this, flip it, it will trigger Sarah's effect, and you can pull out whatever you want. Speaking of going second, that would let you summon a Myrmilio using her special summon effect, so you can destroy a spell or trap card on your opponent's board. Then I'm playing 2 Floodgate Trap Hole. This card is deceptively powerful. It doesn't seem that great at first to a lot of players because it doesn't remove the monster from the field, but just putting it face down can sometimes be the best removal for combo pieces that your opponent would then be able to recycle if you put them in their graveyard or even banished. Just 1 of Network Trap Hole. Just 1 Gravedigger's Trap Hole. So playing 2 of this card is also good. It's just that if you are not going first, then this card really doesn't work out very well. It's just a card that's in your hand, and you can't use it to respond to, say, an Ash Blossom. As I said, there are a lot of targets for that in this deck. You can't use it from your hand to respond to that. So you do have to be going first and actually set this. And again, you pretty much have access to whatever trap holes you choose in this deck, between Myrmilio's normal summon and the effect of Rafflesia. And then we are playing a Solemn Judgment. Now this does pose the problem of that it can exist in your graveyard. It is a trap card that's not a trap hole. So if it exists in your graveyard, you can't use trap hole. You can't use the treacherous trap hole. And you can't get it out of your graveyard with Dianea, so it is just going to sit there. And that is also true for our next 3 trap cards following this, which are 3 copies of The Huge Revolution is Over. This will negate any cards that would destroy 2 or more of your spell trap cards, your monsters as well. Now the banish effect of this is not really relevant, so the only reason this is not a Starlight Road is that I don't have Stardust Dragon. If I had Stardust Dragon, that would change this. So I am playing 3 of this card. And then onto the extra deck. Gaga Samurai attacks twice and lets you close out games. Traptrix Rafflesia, you only really need 1 of her. Even if you're going into a grind game, you're probably actually not using her effect all that many times. That you would need more than 1 of her. Your other cards are going to allow you to go into the grind game, but also her effect where, as long as she's on the field, Traptrix you control can't be destroyed by battle or effects. Importantly, she is only unaffected by trap effects while she has Xyz material. All of the Traptrix extra deck monsters have this effect, that they're unaffected by traps but she only gets it while she has material. So you pretty much usually only want to use the first material off of her, and then you can recycle things with Dionea and Kularia after that point. Number 70, Malevolent Sin, is a really easy budget option that is just removal, can take cards off of your opponent's board, but also its ability to gain attack helps you get over things that were set by Floodgate Trap Hole that maybe you weren't able to get over initially by attacking over other things before you can actually get rid of that card and then go in for a game. Tornado Dragon gets rid of back row. This was before I changed it out. This was a Photon Papal Operative, which doesn't really come up that often, but when it does, it's flipping a monster and reducing its attack points to 0, so that would then let you actually go in for game, generally. Number 41, in this deck I am actually usually summoning in defense mode, as opposed to the Kragan deck, where I said I would usually summon it in attack position. Traptrix Allomeris. So Allomeris is really interesting because you can actually summon her using more than 2 materials, just any number of level 4 monsters, up to, of course, 5 being the number you can have on your field. Well, technically you could use 6 if you had a fusion monster, but I'm not playing any. So you can detach 2 materials, summon a level 4 insect or plant from your graveyard if you were playing a synchro version of Traptrix that would let you bring back your tuners. But for this, we're pretty much bringing back Myrmelio and Dionea to get their special summon effects. But also, if an opponent's monster leaves the field, you can detach 1 material. So I like making her with 3 materials so that I can detach 2, bring back Myrmelio, destroy an opponent's back row, and then using Trap Hole to get rid of my opponent's cards and special summon them to my field. So if you were to get rid of something like, let's say, you're playing against frogs and you were to use a Trap Hole Nightmare to get rid of a Totally Awesome on your opponent's field, negating its effects and destroying it, you could then detach from Allomeris, put it on your field, and you now have that negation. It wouldn't work on something like Borolo Savage Dragon, of course, because it would not have its Boro counters any longer. I am playing 2 of Traptrix Sarah. I don't really find it necessary to have a 3rd one, but definitely the 2nd one is needed. 1 Sarah really is not enough. I'll come back to that. And then the last Traptrix is Traptrix Kularia. So I am playing 2 of Kularia. A 3rd one could potentially come up at some point, but it's not likely. Unless the need for a 3rd one isn't likely to come up unless you're playing against something like Dogmatica that is going to be sending cards from your extra deck to the graveyard. So then as far as our generic cards, these could really be anything. These are just the cards that I chose to put in my deck. They could be more rank 4s. They could be targets to send to the graveyard off of Dogmatica effects if that's something you're worried about. They could be the 3rd copies of Sarah and Kularia, the 2nd copy of Rafflesia, or really just whatever else you can even summon in this deck. So I'm playing IP Masquerena, Nightmare Unicorn, Mech Knight Crusadia Avermax, Appaloosa, Bow of the Goddess, and Access Code Talker. Access Code and Unicorn are really the ones I would recommend keeping absolutely in here. So as far as final thoughts on this deck, I just want to say, this deck it's fun to play. I did also, a long while back, before Traptrix had any Link monsters printed, I did play a synchro version of Traptrix, and that might be an idea that I revisit at some point. Also, on Twitter, I was posting a little bit about Gravekeepers because I have been playing them, just having a little bit of fun with that after I had all my points in the Exceeds event. So I might have some of that coming up as well. I might post some of that, probably more so on Twitter though. So that'll be it for this video.